Have you ever stopped to think about the information on your clothing labels?
It is kind of tough to know, where exactly your cotton is coming from.
As cotton gets cleaned, purified, and finished via a complicated supply chain, it becomes harder and harder to know where the original cotton came from.
Sure, they tell you where the garment was made and how to take care of it, but is that really enough? And is it even true?
Last year, French prosecutors opened an investigation into 4 fashion retailers suspected of concealing crimes against humanity in Xinjiang, implicating brands like Uniqlo, Zara, and Skechers.
Have you ever wondered if the information on these labels is actually telling you the whole truth?
So the research finds that 41% of the analyzed labels are not accurate.
Essentially, really everything that we purchase at this point is unfortunately touched by this.
And these are serious human rights crimes under international law.
Imagine this. You walk into a store and find a pair of jeans that you like. Made in Bangladesh, says the label. What if I tell you that behind this seemingly innocent label, there is a web of human rights violations, deception, and half-truths? Up to 500,000 Uyghur people, a minority ethnic group in China, are forced by the government to work in the cotton sector. We're speaking here of forced labor. To get an idea of the scale of the problem, cotton from Xinjiang, the Uyghur region, makes up 85% of Chinese production and 20% of the world's supply. To put it simply, it's pretty likely that you have Xinjiang cotton made with forced labor in your wardrobe right now. This is a huge issue. In 2021, a company specialized in forensic testing determined that 16% of cotton clothes on store shelves in the US had fibers from Xinjiang. Aware of all this, companies have been urged to stop sourcing from Xinjiang. But what is the problem? That whatever the label might suggest, nobody really knows where the cotton comes from. See, when fibers are separated from their seeds, cotton from different locations is mixed together, making it impossible to trace the origin. The supply chain of clothes is very complex. Let's take the example of the jeans. Where do they come from? Well, the retailer has commissioned them from a supplier who buys the fabric from a mill, which buys the yarn from a spinning mill, which bought the cotton from a broker who bought the cotton from many different farms. Tracing cotton back to a specific farm is almost impossible. So here's the thing, everyone knows there's Xinjiang cotton all over the market, but nobody knows how to stop it. So where does the information on the label come from? This information only focuses on the last step of the supply chain. So when the label says, for instance, made in Bangladesh, that only means that the jeans were cut and stitched together in Bangladesh. That's not a random example, by the way. Countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Bangladesh, some of the world's largest producers of clothes, are known to import large quantities of cotton from China, which means that the pair of jeans made in Bangladesh might actually have slave cotton from Xinjiang, China. That's why these labels are so misleading. In 2021, the US passed the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. While the law helped reduce imports from Xinjiang, it hasn't been able to eradicate them. In 2023, 2 years after the approval of the law, Reuters reported that around 27% of tests performed on shoes and garments collected by the US Customs and Border Protection showed links to cotton from Xinjiang. But see, the real origin of clothes is not the only secret that these labels conceal. In 2019, a research center was commissioned by the Dutch government to investigate the accuracy of material composition information in clothing labels. Over 10,000 garments were tested using FiberSort, a technology able to detect the material composition of clothes using near-infrared light. After this analysis, misleading claims on labels were exposed. In 41% of cases, the information provided didn't match the actual composition of the garment. The strongest deviations were found in garments that combine cotton and polyester, also known as polycotton. Labels systematically claimed much higher levels of cotton, which suggests that there was an intentional manipulation. See, cotton is generally preferred by consumers and therefore it is a bit more expensive. So that manipulation in the label creates a better perception of the product and justifies higher prices. But more generally and beyond these specific examples, these labels fail to paint a full picture. They leave out essential information about the impact of the product, leaving us in the dark about what we are really supporting with our purchase. If you buy a t-shirt, the label doesn't give you any information about where and how the cotton was grown, or if the people who picked it were paid a living wage. If you buy a wool sweater, the label doesn't say anything about where the wool comes from and if the sheep were treated ethically. So this shows the lack of transparency of the textiles industry. The labels on our clothes hide the uncomfortable truths of this sector. Right now, it's really impossible to know the real impact of what we buy. I think companies should be obliged to inform about the real origin and the composition of their clothes. Because at the end of the day, is it really a free market if we cannot access essential information about how products were made?